Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. The topic today is romance under lockdown. Yeah, well, every aspect of our life is affected by the pandemic and the lockdown. And I think in the field of romance, basically, no matter what your relationship status is, you are affected. If you are living with your significant other, that's probably not, the plan was probably not to be together 24/7. So, people usually go to work or whatever. Now you're stuck together and it could be a major test for the relationship. If you're in a relationship and you don't live with with your partner, then you can't see them basically unless you're breaking the rules. And if you are dating, again, either you break the rules and you go on a date and you risk um, catching the virus and you risk getting, I don't know, a fine or arrested or whatever the rules are, or you do this thing that people do now, which is Zoom dating, which hopefully one of our speakers knows exactly what goes on there because I don't. So for that, we have three experts on the topic. We have, you're experts. Zoe Strimpel is a columnist for the Sunday Telegraph and the author of three books on relationships and on dating. Emily Hill is a commentator in the media and the author of Bad Romance. And Nikos Sotirakopoulos is the Ayn Rand Center UK academic advisor and our resident romance expert. So we will start with Zoe.
Okay, thanks, Razi. Well, I mean, you're sort of casting the net wide, this idea of romance in general in lockdown. And I just do want to return to just like for a second to what you said about the difference between those who are in relationships and those who aren't. And then there's this third group of people who have leapfrogged from not to in because of the quarantine. So, I mean, just in terms of my knowledge and expertise, I have no idea what's happening with romance for people who are shacked up together in couples right now. I do know that in Denmark, I think sort of there was some study that showed that, or not studies, some firms reported skyrocketing sales of sort of sex toys and stuff like that. So one narrative is that this is brilliant for romance, especially if you've already got one, it's spicing things up. The other narrative, which is also much less romantic, is that of kind of soaring domestic violence rates, of which stories are coming out thick and fast, including sort of triple the number of women murdered by their partners being stuck in lockdown in the UK. So as ever, it's sort of unclear which of the narratives to plump for, especially if you're looking from the outside, like me, who is not shacked up with anyone. Is it the world of Danish sex toys gone mad and sort of couples rediscovering that when they've got nothing else to do but have sex, their relationship is brilliant now? Or is it the kind of reality of when you don't have those sort of external spaces to go to on a regular basis and have your own world at work, whatever, things actually can go a bit sour and in the worst cases exacerbate violence and things like that. In terms of so romance, let's call it dating, singleness, all that stuff in lockdown. I mean, I'm just going to give my personal view, which is that if you're not in a relationship and you weren't able to kind of just like jump on the lifeboat with someone and be like, yay, we're going to just like float to shore together in this thing, which some people have done. I think it's bleak. I am going with very, very bleak. And in fact, it's so bleak that I think people aren't thinking about it. I've almost disengaged completely from that aspect of existence because I don't see how the way dating has developed through the sort of high volume, high turnover app system where you meet someone pretty quickly because everything evaporates very quickly in a technologically mediated dating situation. I don't see how going from that to this already being romanticized idea of getting to know people, Zoom chats, falling in love by video dating. I don't see how it's the same people on the same apps. I don't get how people who formerly couldn't hold over for 5 days to a date or a meeting are going to suddenly be these people who you can slowly get to know on Zoom and then kind of resume. But then that's probably a very negative view, and I'm sure people I mean, I've seen studies, but you can't trust, by the way, coming from these dating apps and stuff, saying that like everyone's embracing it. I saw one date where, which was reported in the Metro, where they ordered each other a Deliveroo, and the date was that they would each sort of FaceTime or something while they opened each other's Deliveroo. And it just, you know, all this, great, I'm happy for them. That to me sounds like almost like a nightmare. I mean, well, maybe that's a bit of an anti-technological point, but there's an air of unreality about it, and it's nice that people are making the best of it, but I think this is not the time. The bleakness comes in, I think, especially when you really think about what social distancing means, and it means a lack of touch. And you can have all the, you know, we were talking about this earlier, porn bombing you want, you can have all the, you know, the internet does a good job of providing sexual stimulation, but when you really think, okay, I can't touch anyone for an open-ended amount of time or be touched, I think that's pretty grim. Women in their late 30s, early 40s have been already made to feel very anxious about time, things to do with fertility and getting going with, you know, whatever it is, whether it be sperm donor, whether it be choosing not to do anything, whether it be looking for a relationship. And there's a real sense, time is always a really vexed issue for women anyway. And I think that the lockdown is sort of making a lot of women feel like this is not time they have to spend just sitting, you know, basically not living their lives in the normal way, of which dating is a fairly big part of that. How long have I been talking? Am I going on too long? Should I
No, you can keep going.
We'll just do another couple. Well, okay, shut me up though, because I was like, I have nothing to say, and then of course, like an hour later, I'm still like babbling. Well, I mean, so I thought it was really interesting how now the state, the way that how quickly and how naturally the state got involved in conducting relationships and in this crisis, and sort of delimiting what couples can do and be, and who can touch who and stuff. And when, what's her name, Jenny Harry, the deputy health minister, said, you know, or about a few weeks ago, in answer to a question, you know, what should fledgling couples do? And she said, you need to either move in or put it on ice. And there was something sort of strangely, there was something quite conservative about the response to that, which was a lot of people being like, great, now like people are going to have to commit, and sort of men will have to man up, and there'll be less of this sort of shimmy shammying or whatever, you know, this sort of fudging that goes on. And it was as if like in one stroke, a person from on high in the government could sort out years of, you know, commitment phobia and you know, as I say, hedging and things like that. But I sort of, I don't know. I mean, there was this real moment. Then there were all these news stories showing couples who'd taken the plunge together, and they were like making pasta together, having gone on one date, and now they were happily living together. And I just sort of thought, yeah, that's fine. But what about the people who decide to kind of shack up together? The romance perhaps doesn't last. You suddenly realize that that the person who's fun on a date is a nightmare to live with, who's messy. Then there's the sort of epidemiological anxiety, or the sort of medical anxiety. If it's stressful enough keeping track of your own hand washing and what you've touched, having to worry about that with someone else could be stressful. The other thing is a sort of slightly kind of strange echo, I think. When I think, okay, could I get to the point where I just break this freaking lockdown, run the risk of catching coronavirus, and just like have an illegal date or encounter or whatever? And I think, well, it gives me the same kind of anxiety. It's in the same like area of anxiety that I get when I think about STDs. And I think sex always has this sort of slightly scare. It's always been hedged in with sort of potential for becoming ill. And I think it's interesting that now people are sort of much more Now there's a new edge to it, obviously a new dimension, but it's not new. It's not like before you could just, you know, have loads of dates and shag everyone and it was fine. You still ran all kinds of risks. So I think I'm just going to end on a positive note, which is that I think there's a lot of comparisons going on, and you know, those whose IVF treatment have been cancelled as of today. All fertility treatment in this country has been completely banned, including people who are in the middle of it. You know, they're looking at families who are complaining about being stuck with the kids, and they're feeling jealous. Couples are single people may be looking at couples and thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have them? And couples in relationships that aren't being advertised might be thinking, if only I was on my own. So there's a real grass is greener potential here. But I'm going to end by saying there is a lot of peace and potential and creativity and sort of other sort of things in enjoying this time to oneself.
Thank you, Zoe. Emily.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to rant as quickly as I can because I've got so much to say, and you can just turn me off as soon as you got bored. So I wrote a short story collection called Bad Romance that was actually about love, and because that used to happen before dating apps arrived. That used to happen, you know, you used to have relationships and so forth, and fall in love with men, and you know, have very, very bad ends to these things. And then these things called dating apps were invented, and everything went to shit, and there was no love, there was only hookups. I don't know whether that's just my experience and I'm particularly bad at things, or something really sinister has gone on. All I know is that in 2017, quite randomly, Sunday Times Style called me up and said, could you write a column about dating? And I, at the time, was thinking, well, you know, as a journalist, you have to kind of take the commissions where you get them. So I started writing this insane little glimpse of my situation that I was in at the time. I was reading a lot of Svetlana Alexievich, who's a Nobel Prize winner, and she does these brilliant oral histories. And she wrote this book called Secondhand Time. And there was this, and basically it's like snapshots of history. People, she just goes around talking to different people, writing down their memories, their experiences. And so she wrote this this beautiful piece about interviewing this woman who was basically talking about the Soviet Union in the aftermath of World War II. And basically the whole of the Russian male population got absolutely destroyed. They either all died, and the ones that were left had no arms and no legs, and were sort of confined to these homes for the very badly wounded. And the women in this particular snapshot of what was going on were so desperate to smell a man's shirts and hang them up on the washing line that they would go to the home for the veterans with a wheelbarrow, and they would put a man in one of those and wheel him home. And then 2 weeks later, they would return him because he was very, very badly mashed up and turned out to be a massive alcoholic. But it was just a glimpse into what was going on then in terms of what we all want as human beings is love and intimacy. And you do kind of crave that connection with another person and the smell of them and the touch of them. And so I wrote a very crazy column which saying that I very much identified with this situation. And one of my best male friends had just moved in, and I found myself in this really odd kind of unconfessable situation, which I'm confessing anyway, of actually like coming into the house and smelling his shirts because they smelled so good. And so I don't know why they decided that they were going to let me write this column, but then they did let me write this column, and then they wanted me to actually go out on dates, which is when I found that the situation in Soviet Russia is kind of replicated here today, because there's a startling lack of intimacy in relationships today. And it's all based on the physical. It seems to be like literally having people there. And so what I'm particularly enjoying right now, in contrast to Zoe, is actually the romance of lockdown, because I really do believe that there is something slightly different going on, mainly because you have no access to the body. So the fear that you're going to get tricked into sex, which is what usually happens to me. A man sort of seems to really like me and have a, you know, sort of pretends all sorts of things in order to sleep with me, and then sort of as soon as that's happened, he buggers off, which is extremely hurtful every single time it happens. And that can't happen right now. So we're in a very, very strange situation where this crisis of intimacy is kind of being reversed, because everybody's going to have to try way, way harder. And so what actually happens at the minute, because I am dating, is you're getting into situations where you are talking to people way more, because that's all you can do. And there's messages, and there's confidences, and there's jokes, and there was this brilliant tweet that I read by this comedian called Caitlin McQuinn, who said, you know who's gonna suffer during social distancing? Dudes on dating apps. Welcome back to courtship. We're about to get Jane Austen up in here. Now write me a poem. And that is, I think, exactly where we are right now. I wrote, so very early on, the Daily Mail, because obviously I wrote this insane dating column a while ago, said, you know, Emily, could you tell us your experience of dating during coronavirus? And I was like, absolutely, I can tell you about this, because I am very good at writing a load of nonsense about myself. So the quote that I liked is, as always, is by Maya Angelou, and she says, love is like a virus, it can happen at any time. And what it reminds me of right now is there's all these sort of tales of us living through unprecedented times, and I think we are, and I think we'll look back on this period in the future and we'll find it very interesting. And it just reminded me of the tales from Norfolk when I was a child, when you actually had tales of love, like in these local communities, everybody knew everybody, as you obviously don't in the modern world, and especially not in London. But I grew up in a very small rural village called Blakeney, and there was this, where we lived, there was the quay, and there was a building by the quay, and it had this plaque, as they have, you know, in London you have fancy plaques of Virginia Woolf lived here. In London, in Blakeney, you have plaques that say 1953, the flood came up to here, right? So there was this terrible flood that killed loads of people called the North Sea Flood. It was in 1953. And the great tale of romance in my little village was about Stan, the village plumber. He was a spectacularly bad plumber. He was really terrible. But he rowed his little boat to his fiance's so her parents ran a post office in Salthouse, and he rowed his boat because the flood had come right up to the top of his building and rescued her and her family, and this went around. And I just think there's opportunities here to have kind of great acts of bravery. And, you know, if you come down with coronavirus and your Tinder date somehow gets you to the hospital, I think you're onto a winner. So I think there's potential here. The texting, the talking, the no hookups, people have to invest more. I really like the memes that are going around. I think they're very, very amusing. I also like the fact that, as you said earlier, I'm not cooped up with someone who's driving me completely insane, or in very, very small children. Because that would not be fun in a one-bedroom flat that has no balcony, let alone a garden. I think single people at this time are in a very good situation in comparison to everybody else. And one of the insulting things that happened to me recently was a young mother emailed me and said, could I possibly write how awful my plight is at the moment? Because, you know, we should get into an argument about how my life is way worse than hers right now, which is the typical kind of patronizing attitude that married people do have to single people. But I think what it ultimately comes down to, and I will stop talking now, is that there's a chance to slow down a little bit, have a little more of a thought, think about things a little more, take things a bit slower. I wrote this piece for ES magazine just a couple of months ago, which said that dating apps had completely wrecked romance in the 21st century. That is ultimately what I ended up wanting to write in the style column every week, because it's so hard to find love. And I don't think anybody really talks about that very much, because it's rather an embarrassing thing to admit. And also that dating apps are so very, 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 very good at facilitating sex. They really are absolutely brilliant at it. Phenomenal. It's, you know, it's really rigged towards that. And the piece just went everywhere, and it seemed to really identify with people. And I think ultimately what I feel about dating apps right now, and why they're not working, and why so many of us are unhappily unable to meet someone they connect with, is because of this kind of, one of the lines I say is that dating apps have done to love and romance what machines did to humanity in Terminator 2. And I genuinely believe that. They've stripped out the humanity on every level. Nobody's really fighting back. There's no Sarah Connor. And the other kind of thing that I think about a lot is classic rom-coms. So my favorite rom-com is Nora Ephron's When Harry Met Sally. And I genuinely think that in the age of apps, basically, if you were going to rewrite When Harry Met Sally for today, you would call it Sally Never Met Harry. And she would have swiped right past him because he was balding. And she would probably end up in Katz's Deli faking an orgasm out of sheer frustration. So I just think we have an opportunity here to maybe do things a little bit differently, to try to connect with people, to actually think about their hearts and their souls and their minds, and rather than just their bodies.
Thanks, Emily. Nikos.
I had 2 or 3 points, but there's so many interesting things thrown on the table, so I have to comment on that. So on the dating apps, I think the dating apps did a huge service to humanity, which is it really shows us how people see themselves. And what do I mean? So I had Tinder for 5-6 months. I never gone to a single date because basically I wouldn't swipe right. But if you use it as like a social experiment, it's very interesting. It gives you such information that 5 textbooks of social science could never give you, because it basically says you how people see themselves and how they, and also sometimes it's kind of disappointing. So I remember seeing profiles saying, okay, you got like 2 photos to show us who you really are, and you choose like 1 photo where it's impossible to say who is who because like 5 people there. And then on the text, you say something which is like completely, again, unimaginable and all that stuff. And I'm talking about boys and girls, because I had like I could see both basically. Because again, I didn't want for dating, but more for like social experiment, let's say. So I think it's not that things went south because of the dating apps. I think this is who we are. And through these apps, we kind of make it more obvious. So anyway, and by the way, there's not a huge difference, I think, by the fact that now most people are, let's say, seeking romance online, because according at least to statistics, more than 1 out of 3, and in some cases more than 40% of heterosexual couples would meet online. And if we go to the LGBT community, this number skyrockets even before COVID. So anyway, that's that, because of some of the interesting things that Emily mentioned. Now, romance in crisis. I think this crisis is very different from previous times of crisis. Because quite often in times of crisis, you have this kind of surge of erotic tension and of this erotic urgency. And the scenes that come to mind is from the film, which is also a book, and I've also seen it in theater, The End of the Affair. If you've seen this film, it's this couple that are having an affair during World War II. And there's these very beautiful, erotic, like romantic scenes where there's all this passion and all this urgency, and literally out there are bombs. Or we see in many films, or even in mythology, for example, we see in the Trojan War Achilles coming back from the battle and having, sleeping with his girlfriend, Briseis, what was her name? Or there was this very beautiful scene, for example, in the film 300, where Leonidas is about to go to war and he's having this very passionate sex with his wife. So, but there's something different here, because these were cases where there was a danger out there, but when you meet with your loved one, when you fall in her arms or in his arms, this world disappears. But nowadays, with the virus, it looks like the other is part of the problem, is part of the risk. So it's not like, oh, I came back from the battle or I survived this day of bombing and now I sneak to my lover and we forget everything at least for like 45 minutes while kind of this brilliant sex lasts. This is like, no, stay away. Everyone is potentially, as also Rise, I think, mentioned in the introduction, like, oh, am I gonna get the virus now from this? So although libido usually flourishes in this situation, I don't experience it this way. I mean, these are more times that are more a fertile ground for romance, mostly in our head though, not in real life. So I find myself these days, reading a lot of fiction, trying to escape this, let's say, gloomy atmosphere by trying to, going back to novels or poetry or whatever. And this creates this beautiful atmosphere in your heart, but which you don't really expect to materialize in real life. And something else that I've noticed, which is very interesting, like ex-girlfriends or girls from my past remembering me and kind of checking out how I am, and me doing the same. And I don't think this is only in romantic terms. Like I remember also old friends and all that stuff. So in a way, this situation kind of is also a test on who are the people that you really think about when you spend a lot of time with yourself. So my last point, which is, okay, not really an advice, but a lot of people say that the crisis is a real test for a couple. Like if we survive this, or if this goes well with this person, then I know we're good. And I would say this is not necessarily a wise way to see things, because quite often in this unnatural environment and that we find ourselves, what people mostly crave is security and familiarity. So I wouldn't be surprised, for example, if there were some relationships that were on a downhill spiral, and now suddenly it's like, oh yeah, maybe I should stay with that person. But think it this way: if in 2 months we have these huge parties that everyone says we will have, where and there's going to be this outburst again of enthusiasm and energy and libido, then maybe suddenly the Mr. Reliable or the Mrs. Oh, she's so sweet and takes care of me, now maybe they will not look that appealing anymore. And I've seen it also in myself in the past, that in times of crisis, someone who might not be so much in love with you or not so crazy about you, they might crave this, they might want this stability, if you are a stability guy or a stability girl. But then when the crisis is over, it's like, okay, now it's time again for fun, so you don't stand up to what I expect. So, I mean, I'm really worried about my beloved ones who are couples, and I really hope they stay together, but I don't see the crisis as the ultimate test. Actually, I would even say that the crisis quite often, or a weird situation like the one we find ourselves in, could give us the wrong signals. Thanks.
Thanks, Nikos. Well, I have a bunch of questions, but I'm not gonna ask them all because we have a few questions lined up. So I'll ask just the one. You all spoke about dating apps and how they're sort of geared towards sex, but that's when we think of dating apps, we usually think of Tinder. There are the dating apps where you actually have to write a very long description of yourself, and they are aimed towards people who are, trying to find a serious relationship.
So no, that's absolutely wrong. Tinder was the first, okay? So it gets all the appropriate, all dating apps facilitate that. Every single one. Hinge, the app that was made to be deleted, what happens is you delete it, then you download it again. It's no different from the other ones. And also, I mean, what I really want to do, and I'd be interested to know what Zoe's done on this in terms of her research and so forth. But what I really want to look at is the economics of dating apps, because they are not designed to facilitate love. They are designed to make money. And they're very kind of opaque in terms of what they're doing. My most compatible match on Hinge is this man who is massively overweight with a massive, extremely large, very prominent beard, who said that he's looking for great wit with 2 T's and big jugs, neither of which I have. And I imagine the reason that he has been pushed towards me as my most compatible, because, you know, would make me want to shoot myself if that really is my match in life, is because he's paid for the app and I haven't. Now, I don't think they're transparent on any level on that. And every single dating app, I mean, the thing is Tinder gets all the opprobrium and nobody looks into anything else. So that's just what I wanted to say. I wanted to broaden it out. I mean, especially Bumble. I mean, Bumble being the feminist dating app. Why is it feminist? Because women have to make the first move. So basically you take away the one thing that men have traditionally had to do, which is come up with a funny line and try and approach you. You have to do that. My friend, one of my friends was using Bumble to sleep with 7 different women at once, who I all presume that thought that he was just sleeping with them, but because there's this 3rd date rule, which I don't know how au fait everybody else is with all the kind of the rigmarole and kind of weird kind of cultures in dating apps. To be honest, I wish I was like Nikos and I had just been on there for research. God, I wish I lived in that universe, because wow, it would have been, my life would have been happier. And I'm going to stop ranting now. I think I've had slightly too much gin. But what I wanted to say, because I agreed with so much of what Zoe was saying, but also the thing that I liked about what Nikos was saying was the beautiful atmosphere in your heart. I think we all need a beautiful atmosphere in our heart. And I haven't seen that anywhere. And so that's why I'm a major fan of this lockdown. Because yeah, I do feel like somehow there's, and maybe it's only fleeting, maybe it's going to go like that. But yeah, that beautiful atmosphere in your heart, that's exactly what I want. And also you should feel really lucky all your ex-girlfriends checking in. I'll ask Zoe this as well. Has one of my ex-boyfriends checked in?
Zoe, you've been mentioned a couple of times, so you go next.
I mean, yeah, I think romance in crisis is as much a tempting literary and filmic trope as it is a reality. I think that's what Nikos is kind of saying. Partly because when this is over, what will the reality be? You mentioned false signals. I also like this idea that you're sort of finding refuge in fiction, and there's a kind of building of a romantic cultural kind of hiding in culture and cultural scripts that give you a very, like, a perfect picture of romance. But I think there's a danger there. We know that romantic scripts are built through cultural scripts. You literally learn romantic scripts from movies and TV and books and stuff. And the thing is, and Emily will be the first to agree with this, you know, that's so far from being how it tends to work out. So I do wonder if at the end of this, those of us, or those who have been seeking refuge in those romantic cultural landscapes can then cope with the kind of probably de-romanticized reality. But maybe Emily will be right and it'll be borne out. I mean, I tend to take a slightly less kind of definitive or monolithic view of apps. I mean, Razi, you mentioned these, like the idea of, you know, apps that are more serious. I think Emily's right. There are no apps that are like not used in the way that all apps are used. They're all basically Tinder. And I agree, like some of the specimens that have been pushed my way on Hinge are just, I mean, it doesn't work, because actually if they prioritize people who pay and they say, oh, that's your match, you think this is the worst app ever. But I think, as someone in the comments said, Amen. Yeah, everything can be used in multiple ways, and I think that there's definitely you can use Tinder. I actually had a relationship from Tinder. Okay, it was the worst relationship I've ever had, but it was a relationship. You can use it in various ways. So you can kind of use them just for sex, or you can use them more seriously. But I still stick by my idea, which is, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from Emily maybe after, like, but how she's managed to kind of have these more engaged conversations, because just on the very brief flicks through Tinder and Bumble, but I just increasingly can't bear the sheer quantity of rough that you have to go through to find anything even remotely approaching smooth, because it's not just great, some smooths, it's like all the rough, and all of that has a really damaging sort of damaging kind of nasty effect. But when I did have a quick glance, I didn't get the impression that there was any change in the types of people or the quality, the caliber of the kind of options. So I sort of thought, well, I wonder, maybe I will get back on it from a research perspective and just see if I can sort of tap into something of what Emily's been talking about. But basically, I kind of like the way that apps have been geared up. Well, I don't like, geared up for sex. At least you know where you stand with the apps. Sex is an outcome you can definitely have, which I think is an important outcome in many ways, but it can also cause pain. You can then pivot from that to relationships, I think. Again, it goes back to that way that you can use it in multiple ways.
Yeah, before we go to Nikos, Eamon's comment in the chat was that he knows somebody who used Plenty of Fish to get a very successful long-term relationship, and also somebody who used it to sleep with several women a week. And Charlotte says that she has a very successful relationship that came out of a dating app. So
actually, I could just say one more thing, because Emily mentioned the economics, and there is just one thing to say, which is that whether or not there's an interesting story in the way that the apps make their money, which I imagine is more about integration with Facebook and advertising and stuff than about people paying, although maybe I'm wrong. There is a very long history of economics being used to think about dating from absolutely all levels. Marriage market term, which we all know, coined by Gary Becker, the economist, in 1974 or something like that. So I think that is a kind of interesting area when we just boil it, when we're thinking about romance, to actually make that jump just across the way to that thing of economics. And actually, can economics be sexy and romantic at the same time? Possibly.
Yeah, Nikos.
Oh, right. Well, I haven't got nothing to say, because I have literally zero experience with these apps. But just one thing, which is, again, I think we should appreciate the apps. And to remember my leftist days, Zizek had said something very interesting. He said, when you have like this serious guy with a suit who goes to this video game, and imagine he's this kind of guy who goes and, I don't know, does crazy things, maybe the real thing is the mask that he wears on the video game. So I would say, actually, these apps give you a very good insight to who someone is. So I don't really buy this, oh, he looked good in the app, but then he turned out to be. I think even from one page and from like 5 lines, you can find a lot about how people see themselves and what is kind of to use the objectives, their sense of life. So, but anyway, Emily wanted to say something.
I'm sorry, Nikos, but that is the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard in my life. Appreciate the apps. You've never been on the apps. How can you appreciate the apps when you've never been on the apps? Like, and the idea that you get insight into someone on a dating app, like you get men laying down with tigers, lots of ski photos.
Yeah, but that tells you something. Like when you see someone with a sedated animal, this tells you something. This tells you that this person is probably...
It's a trope. This is, it's a laughable trope.
But yes, but this is a message though.
Seen on dating apps, and you don't find love through dating apps. Like, so you actually have no experience of dating apps. So, saying dating apps are wonderful, that's what, and we're all told when, this is the thing, because it's our fault, right? It's our fault. It's our individual fault for not being able to find love, because we don't appreciate that, and we don't appreciate that. And we're lonely because we're freaks who don't kind of pick the right photo, and they say we can't connect. I don't know how you meet these women who contact you when everything goes to shit, and everybody's lonely, and they're kind of checking in on you. You didn't meet them on a dating app. So it's all very well saying the concept is great. The concept's wonderful. I could say that. I could say, okay, I think one of the things that is often said is that the bicycle transformed human society, because it meant that you weren't stuck in your village. You could cycle towards somewhere else and meet someone else. So potentially you've got a limitless opportunity, right? There's 9 million people in London. I don't know how many people are single, but I have this great pool of people. I can literally dial up somebody on my phone as easily as I can order a pizza. So much potential, but that isn't how it works. It's not how it works. So the theory is beautiful, as so many theories are, right?
No, you're right. Yeah, the pizza thing doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work, because you're buying pizza. Prostitution is absolutely beautiful. One of the things that my last boyfriend told me was it's completely ruined strip clubs, because apparently sad men don't go to strip clubs to get a woman to put £5 down a woman's panties, because they can just get one on Tinder. The way men have their attitudes to women, and I don't believe this is actually confined against women. I do believe that this is actually something in the gay community as well. Not that I know this, but picking up and using people as body parts, that is what's happening. That's the reality. And it's really, this is one of the things that I think is an injustice in our society, because very, very, very few people will let you write about dating apps, or the reality of dating apps, because they don't want to know. And they don't care about how we're doing things differently. And it was interesting, because I've wanted to write, and this Evening Standard piece that I did, it went everywhere. People were sharing on dating apps. Not on dating apps. They weren't sharing on dating apps. People on dating apps were sharing on WhatsApp. And it was going around, and it's the first thing I've ever written that's made me kind of feel like a very, very, very minor celebrity, because I'd go into social situations and they'd be like, oh my God, you're the person who wrote that article. And I wasn't able to write that article for several years. Since 2017, I've been pitching that piece about how dating, the actual human impact this technology has, and how alone it makes us feel. And nobody wanted it, because everybody in charge, and Zoe will know this, in terms of all her commissioning editors, they're all married. So they've got no insight, they've got no interest. They like to kind of blame it on you. The narrative around, if you're single, there's something wrong with you, you're too picky, all this kind of opprobrium gets heaped on you. It's not the technology, it's you. So what happened was I stopped bothering to even try and write about the issue. And then the editor of Yes Magazine became single. And suddenly, voila. And the rest is history. But yes, I completely agree with Zoe. So yes, there's detritus, right? There's just endless people who are just going to try and, just send you really inappropriate messages and just neg you. I don't know whether you've heard this term, Nikos, or, the negging, they put you down, make you feel like shit about yourself, because that's going to, make them feel better about the world. The last E-date I've been on 2 E-dates. The last E-date started going on about what a wonderful time he had on Tinder, but then it started, unfortunately, it was taken over by bimbos. And I was like, whoa, you're using the term bimbos to a woman. And he says, it's in the dictionary. I mean, there are people that you will meet who are so misogynistic and so horrendous, you just think, why am I even trying? But all I'm saying about what's going on right now is I've done a lot of swiping. I've done a lot of kind of trying to speak to people. But what I normally don't get is anybody talking back. And so I don't know how long it's going to go on for, probably 3 weeks. But I'm quite enjoying having little texts, little romances in my head. The beautiful atmosphere in my heart is flourishing.
Emily, you missed one point. Everything I said about dating apps is why they're bad. But
Right.
the thing I don't get, but what I'm saying is everything is very clear. Like you spend 10 minutes in the, okay, not 10 minutes, you spend 10 hours with them, you've seen it all. So that's what I'm saying. They're transparent. Most of the red flags are there. It's quite obvious why they can't work, but that's why I meant they're brilliant. In a way, brilliant in terms of they tells you what is out there, and basically they're telling you, go away. I don't even think that they give like a false hope, because you can't get a false hope once you've spent like 10 minutes in one of them. But anyway.
I think if you were trying to bring about the revolution, you would definitely make everybody join a dating app, because they would all rebel.
Guys, I love the back and forth, but we do have questions. And since we're talking about swiping on Tinder, I don't think anybody here has swiped more than the person who will ask our next question. And he also mentioned in the chat that he met both his wives on dating apps, and that's one after the other.
Both his wives.
Not both at the same time. Like he
got the two wives.
Well, he will explain. George.
Thanks, Raji, for the introduction. So let me just say a bit about myself. So I'm not married, but I'm about to get married. My wedding got postponed because of coronavirus, and we cannot have the big party that we would like to. We have children. I used to be married before, so I'm also a divorcee. And my first wife, it's not true, I didn't meet her in a dating app. We did meet on Facebook, actually. But my current partner, we met on an app called Happy. In between the two of them, I spent quite an excessive time in dating through apps, particularly Tinder. And it was really a great time. I mean, I wish I could use it for research again, but unfortunately I cannot. No, I mean, it's great. Anyway, first of all, I wanted to just give you what it's like to be married with kids in a lockdown. It's horrendous. It's very, very bad. Not because of any other reason than the practicalities of managing life and work requirements. So we both work. She works, I work. We both have to go on calls, conference calls. We have deliverables. And we have the kids that need attention. And we are constantly arguing which conference call is more important, who needs to go and work while the other person is keeping the kids entertained. And this is an ongoing thing. So it's very, very difficult to manage. Also, finding the time to maybe speak to someone and tell them something that you don't want your loved one to hear, that is an impossibility. I don't know, Emily, how your married friend told you about how difficult her life is in quarantine while she's married, because I don't know where she found the room to do this without offending her husband. Or it just seems impossible to me. I have closed the door now and I'm speaking, but I don't know if I'm being listened to or no, just joking. She would be fine. The thing about the apps, what I wanted to say is, look, I get your point, Emily. I think apps are very much like a car. You can have a fast car, but if you don't put your foot heavy on it, on the pedal, it's not gonna go very fast, it's gonna go slow. So you have the opportunity to delay the discussion and to kind of speak to people more and more and more until you kind of do your due diligence, like any other aspect in life. You know, you talk to them and you ask the questions, and then you can. I guess if someone is of that persuasion where he's just interested in body parts, as you said, then that person would lose interest after a while. You cannot, keep talking to them, and so you can do that. From my perspective, I really enjoyed the apps because they did make the use of my time. They are very efficient. Like, you don't, in a bar, you go and talk to someone, or in a school environment, or in a work environment, you go and talk to someone and you ask them on a date, then that becomes news. Everyone, all their friends know. So if one of their friends liked you, then they're going to say, oh, you tried to go out with my friend. No, I'm not going to go out with you. There's all these complications that go out of the way in terms of apps. And also, that the person that has matched you likes you back. So that is really, really helpful. It's not a driver. You're the driver when you're using the app. And yeah, you can, the app is not responsible for the kind of people there's out there. These types of people would have existed without the apps as well. The last question, and this is a question now I have for Emily, is whether you enjoy sex, because the way you describe it is people try to trick you into it, and they use you and they run away and all of that. Okay, so someone may have lied to you. That's a terrible thing. Someone may have not lied to you. They may have had sex with you, and then after a while, dating with you, they change their mind. And they said, okay, I dated with her, we had sex, and fine, but I don't want to be with her for the rest of my life. That is something that is an acceptable, option to have until you commit yourself to a relationship. So, but I don't think that whenever, for example, a woman left me after having sex, I never thought that she used me. I said to myself, okay, she enjoyed it, I enjoyed it, it was nice. Okay, she doesn't like me anymore, that's fine. I don't see why you perceive it in such a negative way. It's a positive thing, sex is positive. Sex is fine, it's good, it's fun, even if it doesn't lead to happily ever after. Okay, so I wanted your comment on that, really. And that's it. I don't have anything more to say. If you have any questions for me with regards to being married with kids and being in quarantine, I'll be happy to answer.
Emily.
No, I'm very glad that I don't have any kids and I'm not in quarantine with them. I have to confess that openly and freely. Okay, so the way it used to be, right, in terms of when everybody met in real life, if a man just wanted to have sex with me, he would come up to me in a bar, and he would come up with some line and maybe try and fill me up, and I'd knee him in the balls and say, fuck off, mate, I'm sorry, I'm just not interested in that. And what they have to do now is they have to pretend that they are interested in more than that. So yeah, I do feel conned, and it comes back to this thing, intimacy. Okay, so I think things mechanically things are different between a man and a woman. Okay, so I don't know whether you've kind of done much research into the orgasm gap, but there is one. It's worse than the gender pay gap. So a woman's body is very different to a man's. Like most men having a one-night stand will, do the operation with the penis, will generally ejaculate, have an orgasm, have a very nice time. A woman has a more complicated body structure. Unbeknown to most men, the clitoris and the internal organs are actually far bigger than a penis and far more exciting. But as has been shown, I'm sure Zoe will back me up here, most of those beautiful orgasms take place within the context of a relationship where a woman can explain to a man how her body works, what does it for her. It's not as easy as just, thrusting and hey, we're there. So in terms of, I love sex, and I've got a very good sex life, thank you very much. I'm sorry I worried you briefly. But ultimately, it's about intimacy. So I'm looking to fall in love. I don't want to just have sex. I want to have, as Nikos said, I'll keep coming back to it, it's such a beautiful phrase, the beautiful atmosphere in my heart. That's what I want. And I want a love affair. I don't want to just, no. So yeah, I do feel tricked. I felt, I mean, I don't really, the thing is the weird thing about how I got into dating is I do not like talking about myself, not surprisingly. But I don't like writing about myself. I don't like confessing anything that's going on with me. I like to have a private life. What I love to do more than anything is to take my shitty personal experiences, turn them into very sinister short stories in which the man is very cruelly revenged against, and have people read them and enjoy them. But in my real life, unfortunately, I struggle. And actually I think that's what, and ultimately, you know, bringing it back to romance in lockdown, which I appreciate, like, you know, it may be very, very hard to continue the romance if you have someone to be romantic with, but I mean, you know, congratulate yourself that you got to that point. You know, you've won. You're in love, you're getting married, you know, you're doing well. If you haven't got that, you kind of just have to, well, you have to be optimistic, don't you? Otherwise you just drown in a ditch.
Zoe.
I've lost track of, like, I mean, Emily's giving such vivid and clear lines on these things. Actually, I was going to go back to something Nico said about, well, this idea of, I think, just to get back, rather than to have a kind of general purpose for and against apps, for and against casual sex, this thing of what we imagine the crisis is doing. I just want to say it's funny because no substantial ex-boyfriends have been in touch, but it's like a concentric circle of the most irrelevant. It's like starting from the outer circle of relevance. Those are the ones who are getting in touch. Like someone who I had one night with in September is getting in touch, or a Belgian who I had a very brief affair with 3 years ago is getting in touch to warn me about sort of how to best stock up for the, you know, and sort of sending me little clips about how to kind of protect myself. So I think just to, you know, maybe there is something here in thinking about interesting differences between male and female experience of romance in lockdown, and indeed women's and men's experiences of all these things. And Emily's obviously drawn attention to, yeah, the difference in the way men and women experience sex, although I don't know, I think there's I don't know, I think men, there might be some, it might not be as straightforward as all that, but I do think I think men experience time differently, and I think they experience what happens after a relationship differently, so, or after any encounter differently. So where I've completely forgotten about these people, they kind of hover back in with this sort of bizarre, I mean, like clockwork, I had about 6 of them, again, from the very outer edges of my, it's like if you picture the circles and getting more and more towards the center where I am, very much the kind of 8th ring. But yeah, I think in their minds, years ago doesn't count as years, or there's some, I often notice there's a difference there in the way men and women perceive time. And I think women are much more clued in, but I think we have to be more aware of time because our bodies are meeting it out all the time. We're always having time. We are time. We are like clocks. And also everyone's always trying to terrify us about time and ovaries drying up and what have you, with each week or month. But men have a completely different sense of time. And they often don't get over relationships as quickly, as thoroughly as women do. And things sort of stick around. So I wonder what the long-term effects of what's happening now, of any kind of crisis on men is, as opposed to women. I do try to steer clear of generalizations, but I do think women tend to be more pragmatic, really, when it comes down to it. So I don't know how that relates to or will be manifest. But was there anything specific that I should be responding to? Because there was a lot of back and forth, but it was mostly about what Emily was saying. Was there anything that I said that was of any interest? Oh, gonna make it personal there.
So I think it's really interesting what you said about men experience time differently. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's just this. I think, firstly, as I say, like women our bodies force us to have a much better internal sense of time. Time is just much more present for women.
But do you not think there's just this level of bullshit? Like they do the bullshit thing and then they come back. or is that not how you experience it?
I don't know. I have this like ridiculous, my friends are constantly fed up with me. I give a lot of people a chance. Like I don't feel enough rage. I allow myself to be tossed around. And then if the thing comes back, I'm like, oh great, better like but it does cause pain. I just think, no, what I mean about women just be like, for instance, you know, on the streets now with social distancing, it tends to be women who are more aware. Yeah. And it's just more encoded, and we're more aware of time. We're more aware of what we're doing with our bodies, everything. Men tend to be less aware, I think. Although I've encountered pretty unaware women on the streets recently. Men are less aware. Time is part of that. They don't have, what possibly is there for men to worry about in terms of time? They vaguely worry when they get to 40 because their career maybe isn't where they, you know, but there's no real time crunch for men. The midlife crisis tends to be much later than women's midlife crisis. So I just think in their minds, like everything's on hold all the time. So something that happens, yeah, it is probably a bit self-serving, but something that happens that suits them. It always, you know, I suppose it has to suit them. Happens in September. June, what's the difference between September and June when you're a young man?
All right, Nikos.
One of my favorite lines by Ayn Rand, I think it's in The Fountainhead. So Rourke discusses with Winand, and Winand asks him, have you ever been in love? By the way, Rourke is single and has been single for ages in the book at that stage. So he asks him, have you ever been in love? And Rourke replies, I still am. And what he means is that that girl for whom he had this huge amount of feelings, and that girl that completely rocked his world, yeah, maybe it has been 10 years, maybe it has been more than 10 years, but so what, right? So see, it's if you experience these emotions, which are very rare, by the way, and I think these emotions are clearly linked with sex. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone said, look, my sexual experience has been okay, but emotionally it hasn't been. Like these things more or less go hand in hand, right? I mean, in terms of specifically like how you experience them and specifically how you see them back. So yeah, time plays, sorry, but it plays no role. That's why actually one of my favorite novels is Love in the Time of Cholera, although it's kind of cheesy. But anyway, but the premise in the book that this tsunami of feelings that he felt decades ago are still there, it shows that it was the real thing and it was something big. And I had also, short point in Zoe, you never know what effect you had on someone. Maybe it was like 2 nights of drinks, but it doesn't mean that you're not important. I mean, one of the girls for whom I had some of the strongest feelings and the everlasting kind of impact, we never had sex. Why? Because life happened. It was kind of a relatively short encounter, and then, she lives somewhere very, very far. But this also means that it kind of becomes a legend of its own. That's why sometimes love and romance is most important for here. Even if it's kind of, fantasy game, the fact that it gives you fulfillment here and it gives you like fuel is maybe even more important than the camaraderie itself. It's the fuel that keeps you going.
Yeah, but can I just say that's why romance in lockdown is working, because it's all in the head.
Exactly.
All in the head. Quite dangerous to mention the Fountainhead, considering like the rape in the Fountainhead. So
there is no rape in the Fountainhead.
Oh, here we go.
The author told us that it's not rape, so who would know better than the author? So.
Well, I think women. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just say though? I think because I just think that this is really interesting and important issue at the heart of romance and lockdown. Emily's perspective, apps, my perspective, and I think at the heart of it is this idea of, and what some of the other people have said about sex. George, okay, casual sex, right? And actually, Emily's probably just more mature than me, but it's taken me to about now to realize that I think we've actually, so a whole generation of women, my generation, born in 1982, grew up on Bridget Jones and then Sex and the City. Casual sex was like the thing we like. I was completely forged out of wanting casual sex. There was a whole vision of like cosmopolitanism and literally cosmopolitans. We were all sold casual sex, like get the notches on the bedpost. Yes, that was a version of feminism, although we were never thinking about feminism that time. I think it's a huge mis-selling scandal. And I think it's interesting how the language around sex, casual sex, it was just fun, blah, blah. It does make it seem almost true. and I can't speak for men, and I don't know if casual sex is a missell for men as well. But I actually, it has actually taken me until my late 30s to begin to really feel that there is no such thing as casual sex.
Absolutely.
If the sex is good, no, you can have sex in uncommitted situations, but without any sense of affection. Yeah, so if the sex is good and then the person doesn't want anything more to do with you, it's not that you wanted to necessarily go out with them or marry them, but it's extremely hurtful and insulting. And you just, you can't articulate that, but you do realize it and you do feel it. And there's a sort of, it's always about the 18-hour mark after it happens. When they leave, you're like, yeah, casual sex, I don't care. I don't need to see them ever again. Then it sets in and you realize it's not that you're like this desperate, pathetic woman who's like needy, but you feel offended. You feel offended. If it's good sex, it's like someone giving you the most, sex is the kind of epitome of a hug, right? It was like more, it's an inverse hug. It's like a hug plus, right? So someone's giving you a hug, kiss rolled into one plus, and then doesn't want, and then seems to hate you or not want any more of you. And it's just the psychosexual signals, the load of that is just too much for, I think it just does your head in a little bit. That didn't stop me for years, all of us for years, my whole 20s, most of my 30s, apart from several long-term relationships, all in pursuit of this. And even now, even though I know this, I will still be like, well, I'll go on a date, maybe I'll have, like, it's still a good to put in my shopping basket and squirrel away. I'm a little bit glad I've pursued so much sex in my life, only because now I don't feel like I certainly don't feel like I've missed out in being a nun in quarantine. I don't feel like, oh damn, I've wasted my like 20s and 30s. So I feel like a long-term satiation, but at what cost? And this sort of double think of I know there's no such thing as casual sex, but reflexively I'm going to keep going for it.
I absolutely no. Can I just jump in, because I think that Zoe has just said the most insightful and brilliant thing, and it cuts to the heart of everything, and it's exactly how I feel, and that is that we've been sold a pup, right? You saying like it's not a feminist thing, right? But it's kind of subscribing to that whole sex. You mentioned Cosmopolitans. It's subscribing to that whole sex in the City kind of thing. That episode where she said, "Can women have sex like men?" Right?
Yeah. So that's like, yes.
Casual sex is having sex like men, right? And what I loved about feminism, what I loved about Jermaine Greer, doing things differently as a woman, and actually saying, no, as a woman, I want more than that. I don't want just casual sex. Yes, I want sex. Yes, I want the hug. I really want that. But I'm not subscribing to this bullshit situation that men and now I would say dating apps have just kind of. The system has been imposed upon us. It is a system rigged for men. It's rigged for casual sex. And, I'm not satisfied with it.
Let's go back to George, and then we'll go briefly back to the panel.
So the first thing I wanted to say is that is something that I forgot earlier to mention. It's about people being stuck in quarantine while they want to separate. I'm thinking back to my divorce, like my former relationship. And obviously what happened there is one person left the house and she went to the lawyers and all of that stuff. All of that couldn't have happened in the current scenario. So I think there's a lot of people that maybe were thinking of separating or were thinking of divorcing, or they're in like deeply unpleasant relationships that now have to stay together, and that could be horrible for these people. I mean, I wouldn't wish it to anyone. So, if there is any victim of this pandemic in a romantic sense, it's people that are in unhappy relationships. It's much worse to be in an unhappy relationship than to be single. So that's the one thing I want to say. Then on the difference in the experience of dating between men and women. In my Tindering days, I did not have very many one-night stands. I had mostly serial open relationships, so they all knew about it. I wasn't lying. They were satisfied to go on multiple dates with me. That enables you to build some romance and some intimacy with a person, because you keep seeing them and you have an ongoing relationship. And I do remember one of those girls, we were sitting in bed one morning, she said to me, "You want to see what I get on Tinder, George?" So she opened the app and showed me. what she was getting, and I was horrified. She said, you know, this is the kind of man that approached me. So if a man can, what did she say? If you can spell, that is like a big plus for a man. If they can be articulate and spell correctly, that already is like a big step towards getting a date with her. And I do feel for girls, you know, that they have such a difficult experience on these apps, and the communication that they're getting is maybe inappropriate because, that is possible. It's a numbers game. So I understand, Emily, where you're coming from in that perspective.
Well, the only man on the panel does know how to spell, so we'll go to him first. But I do want to mention, somebody mentioned in the chat that she knows plenty of women who used dating apps to get free meals from men, and
a woman did not say that. Are you kidding me?
yeah, somebody said that in the chat.
A woman said that.
Yep. So yeah, women are capable of doing bad things as well, not just men.
I really doubt. I think that was a man disguising himself as a woman. I don't know anybody who's done that.
It's a woman who's in the event now, and she had her camera open earlier, so we do know it's a woman.
A woman. Okay, all right.
All right. So the next question was on the chat. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. So Ella asks, how would you define romance? Does all kind of romance have the same final purpose, or is romance an abstraction of intimate chemistry that happens between people regardless of the final outcome? Zoe.
I mean, romance is complete. You can't. It's not a kind of. It's not an object. It can't be kind of completely delimited and described in its entirety. It can be. It sort of occupies several spheres, I suppose. Romance, you could say, is the general sphere in which contemporary courtship takes place. We think of that as romance. I don't know if it's always been romantic. It's romantic now. It's the romantic sphere. I think romance is much more history. Okay, so the big tension. So in my research and stuff, the sort of like all academics, I ended my PhD by saying, but the tension between this and that remains unresolved. And the tension that remains unresolved is between romance as something you work for and approach scientifically and rigorously, i.e. through an algorithm, or in the 1970s or 60s through a computer dating kind of approach, which was very much advertising itself based on its science. It's, you know, use science to find love, or through serendipity and chemistry and stuff like that. So romance can be, you know, you can either be in the science camp, you make romance, or you can be in the alchemy, chemistry, love at first sight camp. I'm interested. I think romance, for all that it's those things, and of course there can be, you know, it is gestural. It comes down to scripts. That's how men know to buy flowers. That's how scenes are. You spend money to create scenes, which then facilitate romance. Which, by the way, I'm completely in favor of. I mean, anyone can spend money on me to create a romantic scene, and I will take it happily. But I think that for me, romance is so it's less about any kind of. It's not really confined to an outcome between two people or a couple, or even a feeling that pervades two people. It's more of a domain, partly the kind of overall heading, 50% minimum commercial, in which courtship takes place. And then it's sort of, you know, it's really imbued in the way we think of the way sort of, well, Emily mentioned rom-coms. So romance is as much informed by the imagination or the sort of the way that culture, films, TV shows, you know, rom-coms, novels, stories, slogans, myths, they sit in our brain and give us, sort of teach us what romance should look like. Then we have to spend money on it, and certain things evoke romance, but they almost always involve spending money. Taking, you know, I've done quite a lot of research. I mean, I find it fascinating how when dating came into being, really, in about the sort of early 20th century, when it ceased to be that you went to visit the woman in her house under the supervision of the parents, no money was spent, to you know, many more people had jobs, including young women. going out, that you started to actually go out on the town. Money became absolutely central to this. And of course, usually it was men paying. But restaurants are considered like absolutely essential to the generation of romance. So romance, I think, is something that has to be produced, and it's produced by certain rituals that involve spending money, like drinks and restaurants. And that's why Valentine's Day is such a kind of thing that it is. And I don't think there's any point in particularly coming down hard on that or judging it. I mean, a lot of what we do is informed partly by the cultural scripts that kind of we grow up with, partly by the associations we have. You know, a nice summer's evening, you're supposed to open a bottle of rosé if you have one. There are all kinds of associations that are kind of, so for me, romance is as much about those things as it is about anything that you could possibly kind of pin down. It's a sort of, it's an ambient sort of, it's a sort of area, it's an umbrella under which you spend certain, you do certain sort of things, you buy certain sort of things, you say certain sort of things, as much as it is looking for, you know, ending up married or, you know, feeling woo.
Emily.
I completely agree with Zoe again. Sorry to be a fangirl, but yeah, I think romance is entirely about spending money. So the book that I've written is called Bad Romance, because that's all I've ever experienced. But I don't like the word romance, ultimately. I like the word love, because I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for love. And I can give a shit about romance, really. But love, I'm looking for love. And it's very difficult to find it.
Nikos?
Right. So romance is a bit like art in terms of that it's a necessity. A necessity for the soul. That's why, so when I say it's like ammunition for the soul, I'm not saying it's ammunition for the soul. No, like realistically, that's what it is. Like I don't know how you could go through life inspired and achieving things if you not if you haven't got it at the moment, but at least if you haven't had it at some point. So my like biggest like romantic experience has been some time ago, but it's still with me in terms of here, right? It's with me in terms of giving me, you know, it's basically shows you this is what life can be, but at the same time this is what you can be. That's why romance requires a self, and love requires first of all a self. I don't want to, you know, quote in order to say I love you, you need to say the I, but it is the case. Like I've had periods in my life where I was feeling like shit. And obviously these periods, I did not have any good romantic relationships. I had miserable ones because I was basically sucking someone down. So romance requires that you also stand up to the occasion. So it is basically, you are here and someone is here with you, or someone is somewhere here. And that someone, once you, it basically tells you this, that's why I say it's like art, right? You see a brilliant, let's say sculpture, a very beautiful body. It's like, that's how life should be. And I see the same with romance. And that's why the outcome doesn't really matter that much. Again, life happens. Sometimes, you know, you get in the way, you are a bad character, I'm talking about myself, or you're difficult, or commitment issues, whatever, the romance goes wrong. But nothing can take away this kind of exaltation, which is always with you again as a fuel. So, and just for the record, I don't think I ever had any romantic moment in a restaurant. So I know it's kind of a cliche, but never worked for me.
Next question is from Daniel.
Hi, so my question is about like lying and dishonesty and like general trying to hide things from people. Like in person, you have all the tells and stuff, like if someone's lying or whatever, but online, like messaging and video calls or whatever, it's much more limited. What ways are there of spotting that sort of thing?
Emily.
Well, you can't. That's the problem. And the thing is, people do lie to you. They lie to you all the time. And it's just so refreshing to meet somebody who's honest with you. But it's very, very hard. I would say trying to find someone honest in a dating app is as hard as trying to find love. Sorry, I can't answer that. But I think you've hit on a very, very important notion.
So if somebody has in their profile, I value honesty, that's not enough.
Oh, that's usually very ironic.
Zoe.
Again, I'm a little bit of a incorrigible. Again, my friends get annoyed with me. I'm like, oh, well, I give people who I'm attracted to a very large benefit of the doubt. So if they're hot or cute or attractive, not even hot, doesn't, forget it. I mean, they don't have to be. But if there's, I don't even think about honesty. I kind of, all I'm looking for is for them to actually say something interesting. So I forget about the honesty thing, and I forget to sort of, I don't know what counts as the kind of information that I would solicit in the early days that could possibly result in a dishonest answer. You can usually sense when there's a lack of plausibility, and that's shocking. And yes, I haven't encountered. I mean, I suppose I haven't encountered dishonesty really, actually, as a trope. It's not something that bothers me. But that's probably because I give completely inappropriate people lots of energy and time, and they're almost too conceited to worry about lying. Maybe I don't know, but I imagine that some of the gestures and the nuances that one does pick up in person, are lost. But I'm curious as to the kinds of things, because I know I've heard it, trust and deception and lies is one of the main areas of research and the body of sociology on everything to do with internet dating. It's a huge area, and Emily's definitely in good company with people who feel that they're constantly being lied to and deceived. But I'm just curious as to the kinds of things either that Emily is deceived about, or that men themselves do deceive about, if any of you have ever, the truth. Height, you're right. Actually, there is one big thing, which is they're like, I'm hot in my pictures. And then you're like, your pictures have absolutely nothing to do with what you look like, and you must know that.
Okay, so my last boyfriend, who I met on a dating app, lied about his age. So when I rejoined the dating app not wanting to match with him, he came straight up because he was lying about his age, because I knew how his age was. So I knew he was over 40. So I was like, okay, well, I'll rejoin the dating app and, I'll just set my parameters. Straight up. And he told me he had no children. He had 2 children. So, like the lying just, I mean, it starts with the height, right? So they all say they're 5'10" if they're 5'8", and that's fine. Like, I haven't got a problem with the man, however tall he is, he's going to be taller than me because I'm 4'11.5", and the half is important, right? So, but it begins then and it carries on for basically ever. The photos are dishonest. I mean, obviously, most men do not lie down with tigers.
That's true. The photos are dishonest.
The photos are completely dishonest. Most of people lie about absolutely everything. It is a confected. It's just like Instagram, right? Most people's Instagram. And actually on a lot of dating apps, they now link to Instagram. So you kind of get this kind of double whammy of the fake existence. But, on Instagram, you would never guess that anyone was sad, tired, any kind of negative emotion. You're not going to see it on Instagram unless somebody's being very aberrant. You're just going to see this beautiful, perfect life that you wish you had, and you don't. And that kind of, I know I've been very, very negative about dating apps, but you have not got me started on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, because that's a whole other discussion. I hate them all. I think they're bad for the human soul.
Nikos, I know you agree with that last part.
Yeah, but so I sympathize a bit with Zoe here in terms of I haven't had an experience where I've been lied to. And it has also to do with the fact that I have serious issues in trusting and stuff. But let me give one example on where sometimes I don't know how to put this. So I had situations where I would say to a girl that, look, and I was sincere. I wasn't like used it as a seduction technique. I said, look, I have commitment issues. It's not going to lead somewhere. Although I like you, I know myself. And turns out these girls later would be hurt because they thought that what I said was actually not honest because it sounded too honest. I have a female friend who tells me, no, you're saying this because it works like, oh, you can never have me. And this is like, no, I was honest like you. But after I realized that because it's not good to then find yourself in a bitter situation, I kind of more sympathize with that person in the chat who said there is no such thing as casual sex. And I kind of slowly, withdrew myself from this field because I don't think it works. But also don't underestimate how many people seriously don't know what they want. So the fact that someone tells you something and then turns somewhere else, I would say one of the most probable scenarios is that they themselves don't know what they want. They don't know who they are. They don't know if they will like you. They don't know why they should like you, or they think they like you for something, but then like there's this conflict between their subconscious and what, they think, oh, you're good looking, you're successful, but then, so people don't know what they want. So quite often what looks like dishonesty, there's a good chance that there's a lack of clarity in their head of what they want. And again, guilty as charged. I've been in this case quite often, and I feel very bad for that. The girl might have thought I'm, dishonest, or I don't know, be cold or whatever. Whereas actually what happened is I wasn't sure what was happening.
Can I
In a second, we'll go to Daniel and see if he has a follow-up, and then.
Yeah.
Oh, Nikos, were you finished?
No, I'm good. I'm
Daniel?
I don't have a follow-up. I thought that was helpful, especially Nikos's last point.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's absolutely fine to not know what you want. And what you do is you say, I don't know what I want, right? And then a woman knows that you don't know what you want. And so if she's going to get into a situation with you where you don't know what you want, then that's fine, because you have limitless time as a man to do whatever you want. You don't need, if you get to mine and Zoe's age where you're heading to your next big birthday is 40, I don't know what Zoe's position is, but if you want a child, for example, which I think is a perfectly human desire that we should be able to frankly confess, but in the age of now, it's like embarrassing to say you're at a certain age and you would like a child, you would like to fall in love, you would like a child. You know what you want, right? So you're kind of saying, okay, what I want to do right now is like, I'm dating to fall in love and potentially, be with someone for the rest of my life. I mean, this is probably not, I'm not speaking for Zoe here. I mentioned her in another context. But, the situation I'm in is I've been very frank because I'm an honest person. I like to talk, as you could probably tell. And I will say, this is what I'm looking for. And if a man, so I'm in this situation, and this is the benefit of lockdown, right? So in lockdown, I was in this situation with this man, and we were honest with each other. He said he told me what he was looking for. I told him what he was looking for, and it was so refreshing because he said to me, I'm not looking. I don't believe in marriage, and I don't believe that people are together for life. And I was thinking, okay, that's interesting because I'm not sure I believe in marriage. I don't think I necessarily do. I don't think you should have to, go through a wedding, and I have massive problems with that. But his beliefs were fundamentally different to mine, because what I'm hoping for is to fall in love with someone, to have them, to want them in my life. I've met many friends, for instance. I've had many friends in my life who I've met, and, I like them, they like me. I can't imagine my life without them. I want my life to include them. And so what I'm hoping for in terms of dating, which I don't get, or haven't found to date, is to find like someone who I can fall in love with, who I want to be with, who will be around. And he didn't believe in that. So somehow in the kind of the dating in lockdown, we had this very honest conversation about what we both wanted. And what was beautiful about him, and what I really, really appreciated, was he gave me a choice. He was absolutely honest. He said, I don't believe in this, and then we had this kind of thing, and I had the choice. Do I want to go and have what I have no doubt, he's very, very beautiful man, very fanciful, could have had that beautiful casual sex, that Zoe's talking about, had a really good fling, really enjoyed myself. And I thought, no, the emotional toll that would take on me is not something I want to enter into. I cannot separate sex from emotion. I don't want to separate sex from emotion. I think that's a very female, womanly experience. maybe that's just me as a woman, but I think I want to celebrate that in myself as I celebrate, you know, lots of things about womanhood. But I have definitely been lied to, because I'm a very honest person. I'm very upfront about things, and I have said in every single time, and I have, you know, as I stated before, I have been lied to about so many things, so just everything. And I don't think it's necessary. I think as human beings, we should be honest with each other, because then we can make informed decisions about what we want. And I think it's absolutely acceptable to not know what you want, but I think you need to confess that frankly and fully up front, so a woman, or, you know, a man, or, you know, whoever you're having sex with, knows that's where you are.
Zoe.
No, I mean, there's nothing I can possibly disagree with in that. That is a watertight and sort of wise view on it. And I'm just actually admiring Emily's ability to do something which I have never been able to do in any walk of life, which is say thanks but no thanks to something that is tempting. That is amazing. I mean, you are right. Like, you will reap dividends from that approach. I mean, I wrote a book called The Man Diet. It was my second book, 2011 maybe, and that was about giving up men for a period in order to do things. Well, I said do lofty things, like do volunteer stuff, or read War and Peace, or do something that made you feel smug and validated because you had done it, rather than seeking to kind of complete yourself and someone else. So, but I had to kind of come up with the all or nothing prescription, which was nothing. So the idea of actually being, or all, you know, binge or starve. So the idea of kind of having that honesty, I really admire. I mean, it's the right way to do it. It's mature. I can't bear honest conversations, basically, because they can so easily have a sort of rejection in them, which is, it's worth pulling off the Band-Aid. It always is. But the amount of situations I've got myself into through fearing that honesty that Emily's talked about, and then just having a kind of ragged sort of dribble of an experience for basically lured on by the promise of, you know, being really into someone, you know, but having not nipped it in the bud because it was. So I bet, yeah. So that's led to a lot of hurt, but it's just that inability to walk away, and that's, yeah. So I think that's interesting, and I wonder if that's more to do with personality type than gender. I think there are probably men who are very, women and men. I always take note when I see people doing that, when they're like, thanks but no thanks, even to, you know, my teenage self just has real trouble saying no in any way, shape, or form to like a really cute man who's obviously like intelligent, you know, not like cute but horrendous, but, you know, who's appealing or has any kind of charisma as well, or to put it in George's terms, who can at least spell. Yeah, so that's interesting, and I think that divides the emotionally kind of sensible from the kind of going off on a strange path.
I would say with me, it's very recent, but it's come out of profound hurt.
I've been hurt. I mean, honestly, very much so. But I think the capacity to just keep hitting your head against the same wall, in my case, is just endless. So when there's a tempting thing on offer, but I think, you know, that's part of a general character trait of trying to grab you know, that it has upsides, being kind of interested, giving people more chances, thinking maybe, you know, believing in the potential for things to not be what they first seem. I mean, that's the other thing about dishonesty. I mean, I've had some of my most sort of intense relationships from just talking in the last year or two from apps, which I never went on before, nor thought I would like have to lower myself to it. But I got over that when I was like 35 or something. I'm 37 now. But, you know, sometimes they start from really unpromising. You know, you think absolutely not, and then you think, no, you don't know. Sometimes it's and so you can sometimes sometimes you can develop quite a negative, or you think you can read everything from the outset, and sometimes you absolutely can, in the same way that pictures can deceive, and you turn up and you're like, oh yeah, should have seen that from that angle, that should have been clear that you would look like that. But the opposite, sometimes it's the bad pictures, and then it's like an absolute stunner walks in, and it's interesting. You just don't always know. But no, your thing about being able to say no is very empowering.
All right. Our next question is from Josh.
Yeah. Hey, thanks everyone. Really interesting, and very nice to hear North Norfolk being referenced. That's where I'm from originally.
Hey.
Yeah. So I know Blakeney well. A few things, just a couple of comments, and then a question to you all. One, I think the difference between men and women is grossly overestimated. In my work as a therapist and a psychologist, I find men and women are nearly always looking for exactly the same thing. They want connection with someone, and they want to share something with someone. And most male clients of mine are not after casual sex at all. They're nearly always looking for a deep connection with someone. The other thing, what seems to be coming across to me a bit in the conversation tonight. I was going to say something about lockdown. So I think the lockdown in general has mostly been a disaster for most people's relationships. I've got one client who's currently going through a separation in a studio flat, and the two of them are there, and it sounds like a nightmare. And I've got 3 clients going through divorce. And my current situation is that my partner, she's currently in Norway, working in the hospitals there on the front line against Corona, and being apart and not being able to have any way of being with her or anything is horrendous. And I really miss her really, really badly. But what I wanted to ask you is, I'm getting a sense that there's 2 positions here to find love. Either you risk a dating app, which I think everyone's pretty clear what dating apps give you nowadays. My experience of dating apps in the past was that the best you ever got out of a dating app was a pre-date date. When you first met that person, it was like, okay, I'm going to decide now if I actually ever want to go on a date with this person or not. And I realized from talking to a lot of other people that dating apps required a huge amount of work for very little reward, and that much more could be put into just going out there and finding people. But my question, but what I seem to have heard is that either you use a dating app or you hope for a serendipitous chance meeting of someone that you might connect with and you might not connect with, but that gets harder and harder. Whereas actually my experience is that, and seeing really healthy couples who really love each other, is that they share the same values. And to go and find someone that you really want to have a good and connected relationship with, you've got to find someone who shares what you love doing or what you love. So let's say you love writing, you want to find people who are really passionate about art, or maybe you really love rock climbing. So you're going to find someone at the rock climbing club. It's going to be much more likely that you're going to really value them and share things that you can do together, and you're much more likely to find a healthy relationship that way, instead of just going out for this random maybe not I'm going to meet someone on an app, when you're banging your head against a wall of repeating the same thing and expecting a different result each time. So my question to you is, do you genuinely think that the alternative is an app or chance? Or do you think there is space to actually, for going out there and really finding people who share what you really love? And the hard work that has to go into that is identifying to yourself what you really love, so that you can then share that with someone else. Because that, from my experience, what I see in healthy relationships is the foundation of strong relationships. And I want us to see what you think of that.
Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
So I think one of the things I really, really don't like, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, but it's single blaming. Okay. So obviously, I would love.
I'm not single blaming, and I'm not accepting that.
I'm saying you're not. I was saying you're not, but the kind of the implication that you can go out and you can meet someone in real life. That's what we all long to do, right? Yes. We all long to do that. But if you go into a place, right? Even if you did go, this is the way the apps have dominated everything. This is why the apps are not working for us. Because if you go to a place, okay, even if you go to a bar, even if we're not at a rock climbing place, which I agree, that would be a great place to meet someone. But they will look at their phones. So the kind of the modern landscape is like you go to this place that's potentially full of people, but people are like, you know, because it's freakish to even like try and initiate a conversation with someone, which I admit is extremely nerve-wracking in the best of circumstances. But everybody, the default thing, apparently even in LA, where, you know, the kind of the dating culture is like completely so advanced compared to where we are in Britain. But your thing is like you're looking on your phone. So like the way the apps are set up is if you fancy a guy in a room or vice versa, your immediate instinct is to see whether you cross their location thing on Happen. So like the way things are set up is just completely against us, I would say. And also the other thing is like, because I completely agree with what you're saying in every single way. Like the ideal is that you love something so much and you go along and you do something and then you meet and your eyes connect and you've got all this stuff in common because you share these mutual interests. But I mean, one of the things, and this is the thing with single blaming, which I'm not saying that you're doing at all. I don't want to make it, I'm sorry if that came across like that. That wasn't what I meant. But, you know, it's like you're not making effort enough. And I think, believe me, single women make, and probably single men as well, because I shouldn't blame them as well, but you make so much effort. But one of the things.
Look at this. I mean, we're doing what we love, Emily. We're talking about dating and romance on a Zoom meeting with lots of men. What's the, you know, I doubt that this conversation is going to lead to us meeting our soulmates, even though there are, 60% of the people in this chat all doing what we love, the shared interests are quite decent looking men. I mean, so the sort of, it's interesting. I don't know how one bridges that gap.
The other thing that I would say is biased is that it is like your clients. Because the thing is your clients are clearly people who are in touch with their own emotions. They are the people who think deeply, who kind of have, who are actually seeking help and like coming to see you, right? So they're like, something's wrong in my life. I want to talk about it. I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you get like the kind of the people who lighting on dating apps who are like like I think possibly narcissists. Like some of them, like to the extent of, I've been in therapy a lot. I've got problems. Obviously, we can all see this. So I talk a lot about things, and but it's definitely the last guy I dated. The only way I can explain the kind of depth of kind of duplicity is like he literally had some kind of narcissistic personality where he needed me to manipulate me, and because he knew that I wasn't going to do things if he was honest, so he kind of does all these other things. So in terms of like, and the other thing I just wanted to say was just to say to your girlfriend or your partner, I think that's who we need to be worrying about this scenario. It's not single people, it's not married people, it's not people who are in small bedrooms. It's people on the front line in Norway who are, saving people's lives. So I just hope she's okay, and I can imagine it would be really hard not to hug her right now.
Nikos.
Right. I mean, just for the record, so one of the nicest, cutest couples I know met on an actual philosophy-themed meetup. So there's that. But anyway.
Oh yeah, I know who that is.
No, but what I mean is it totally makes sense what Zoe says. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but if it happens, it's nice because it means there's this initial kind of thing there. Like beyond that, I don't know what I have to add. I mean, I'll just repeat in a different way what I've said already 3 times earlier. The same people who are in the dating apps would be the same people that if tomorrow there's like the digital coronavirus and the internet goes down, it's going to be the same people who are going to be out there. That's why again, I'm not blaming the apps, and I would say that sometimes the apps help you to actually save time and see some things earlier than you'd see in real life. But I accept what Emily says. She has more experience on actually dating people on dating apps rather than just checking them. So yeah, I'll go with that verdict.
There's also a really important there is a gender point to make here, and I generally shy away from men or this, women or that. I really do think there's much more variety between individuals. But I have noticed that a woman in her late 30s who's single very well may be absolutely great, absolutely no caveats to that. But the men of, there's a well-known issue with bottlenecks and age. Our peers who we're supposed to be looking for, say if maybe a couple of years younger, say if I'm 37, I don't know how old Emily is, say I'm supposed to be looking 34 to like God knows what. I mean, certainly in the 34 to 45 realm, somebody who's just completely single. Okay, maybe by 45 there's a divorce, there's a widowing, there's something, but there's a very kind of uneasy making disparity between the women in the late 30s cohort of single women and the options they are faced with. So when you do, I mean, I've got tons of incredibly close male friends who are all roughly my age, including the spouses of my friends, most of whom I really like almost as much as my friends. There's a reason I like them so much, and that they're great. The fact that they're great does have something to do with the fact that they're married, generally. So I think that, realistically, when you look at the sort of pool of men that we can meet off or online who are supposed to be, the great men will meet doing rock climbing. By the way, that's a big polyamory scene, the rock climbing thing. But the men we might meet, the wonderful men that I bond with, almost invariably they're not single. Of course they're not single because they're great. Whereas you can have absolutely great women like us. We're used to that narrative. Great women who are single, because our relative values move at different times, and a late 30s woman's relative value in the sexual marketplace is perilous for her peers compared to men's value, which does rise in his 30s, and then I think maybe goes down a bit in the 40s. But they're on different tracks. So that's why a lot of women our age are going for younger men, myself included, or have been, although I wouldn't say that's a recipe for success, actually. But there is a potential way that you can exploit the loophole of diminishing returns in your own attractiveness as you get older, because you take on a new exotic value for being older, and that's something you can bring to the party. So I think all this talk about the people you could be meeting and the apps, the men on apps, there is a problem with it. It's much easier for men to find girlfriends and partners if they're halfway decent. That point about the spelling is unfortunately right. It's much easier. Women are happy to overlook all kinds of things if there's a bit of charisma, if there's intelligence, if there's humor, if there's any kind of cohesion of sort of soul and person. Men, I don't think, are so willing, unless the woman meets certain physical ideal. They will then obviously say that, then obviously it's about personality and stuff. But I just think that the women's options do narrow, and that basically if a man, there might be something, not a single man in his late, the options that we're faced with, they're tricky. It's not as simple as, great, that wonderful group of people on Tinder, all those wonderful single men. I do worry about what singleness signifies about men in a way that I don't worry about what it signifies for women. And I would be very comforted if the men rebutted me now and said, that's just not true. I know lots of men who are great, and the reason they're single is this. I don't want to be right, but I have been closely observing this for some time, and I'm worried I am right.
All right. So, Josh, do you have a quick follow-up? Actually, if you have a follow-up, go ahead, and then I'll read the question in the chat, and then go to George, and then the panel can answer all three questions.
I don't really have a follow-up. It's just a bit more of an observation for Zoe, is that I think you find men are very similar in that age group, actually, that you're talking about. I think they're suffering the same. The biological clock thing that you mentioned earlier, I think is very true, that you both mentioned is very true. But the bottleneck, I think, is felt in both genders from what I observe in my clients and friends. A lot of male friends will report that they go on a date with someone and it's literally there's an imaginary checklist going on in their first date that they find very difficult to deal with. But there are red flags out there, I think, for both sexes, and I think to put it set to say that one is this and one is more this than the other is a dangerous ground to be on. But I do think I think you're absolutely right that there are these red flags in certain individuals, and that has to be acknowledged. And it is hard. It's hard. But nothing more, Razzie. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. So Ella asks in the chat a follow-up to the point that romance is necessary. For what and for whom is it necessary? Can one sustain their lives without romance? In order to receive the benefit of romance, what qualities should one have, or is it something that we are entitled to? And before you answer that, let's go to George.
Hi, can you hear me? I have the headphones now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to answer to a comment that Josh made about the rock climbing club. I think that it's possible to find people you share interests and values with in the apps. What I did, for example, before I went on a date is I initiated a discussion and I brought the discussion to my interests and my values. And then if the girl that I was speaking to gave me answers that were completely at odds or I wasn't happy to be with a person of those ideas or those values, then I wouldn't go on a date with her. You can totally do this on the apps. And in fact, on the apps, you have maybe, for example, with a rock climbing, you are confined to the one rock climbing club. While with an app, you can get the best girl out of the 15 rock climbing clubs in your area. I don't know, like it can happen. And you can connect in more things than just rock climbing if you have more values than just rock climbing. So I think the apps are certainly not an obstacle to achieving that. As far as the men that are older, I'm concerned and how difficult it is because the quality is going down. I mean, we live in a world where people are focusing on their careers a lot more. So they are marrying and they're focusing less on their family life and relationships. The younger people, they're not focusing on that so much. So I think as the way the world is going, actually the stock, the human stock in both men and women improves in the older ages than what we had, let's say, in the 80s or in the 90s. Nowadays, 40-year-old women and men are a lot better. So I don't think there is a reason to be pessimistic about that sort of thing. But yeah, that's my opinion. Maybe I don't know. I haven't done any statistical studies to back this up.
Thanks, George. Let's go to Nikos.
Right. So I'll pick the follow-up question by Ella, which is because I think it's very good. So is it necessary? I mean, it depends. Necessary for what? It's not necessary for our biological survival, but I think it is necessary if we are to live life at its fullest, right? So it is necessary if you are to achieve the best thing you can achieve. And I know there will be, examples about people who were celibate and they wrote or they found scientific stuff. Yeah, whatever. That's the exception. That's not the rule. And then the question is something that we are entitled. So can we sustain life without romance? A fulfilling life, I believe, mostly not. But it doesn't mean that you have to have that romance at that moment. Again, I think that even the memory of a good romance and this kind of glimpse into how life can be and why life is so worth living, I think even this could do it. Unless, you don't, hopefully you find it, hopefully you find again. In order to receive the benefit of romance, what qualities should one have to? And it's something that we're entitled to. Well, I would say that like attracts alike. So it depends. Again, if you want someone with values, you need to have equal values. If you want someone who is ambitious, for example, you need to be ambitious. Otherwise, maybe, you're lucky, or maybe someone sees something in you that they like, and maybe you're not the same. But the important thing is you have to be, in my opinion, on your top game, not to impress the other. But again, I say this from like a selfish point of view, so to speak, that's when life is lived at its fullest, when you're at your best. And then this also makes, it's not the law of attraction like in a stupid way, but it's, if you pursue values, you're going to find people who pursue values. If you achieve values, it's easier to kind of, also you have a clearer vision about what is important in life. That's why I mentioned earlier, it's not a coincidence that people who don't know what they want in life are very bad romantic partners, and vice versa. So yes, you're not entitled to it. No one is entitled to something, but I think by working on it, you make your life better. And odds are that unless there's like at some point, you're going to attract something good. And again, this is not single shaming. What I'm saying is what I see as like the logical abstraction here. Thanks.
Zoe.
I mean, no, we're clearly not entitled to romance, although that's a shame. I don't know. I think I don't really have much to add apart. It's a mystery. Well, as I'm just going to refer everyone back to the last line of my PhD. What it consists of will remain unresolved. So that's what I think. I think there are no. It's a very fuzzy, woolly question. Sort of, it's a clearly stated question, Ella, but it's impossible to answer with clarity because it's an inherently. And this is also a quote from an academic talk I once gave. It's an inherently woolly term. So I'm just going to rejoice in the woolliness.
Emily.
So the only romance I know has been bad, and I'm not really interested in romance. Ultimately, I think it's fake. I think it's confection. What I'm interested in is love.
Well, on that positive, or I think it's a positive note, I want to thank our speakers, and I want to especially thank you for sticking around longer than we were originally scheduled to go. And I hope everybody will join us for the next event. It's this Saturday, a Q&A with Josh Dixon, our usual Saturday psychology event with Josh. And next Monday, we have a discussion on the topic, Is Atlas Shrugging? So I hope you'll join us for that as well. And thanks again. See you next time.